In this video, we're going to learn how to build websites with Gridsome and WordPress. We're going to use a base WordPress install, configure the WP GraphQL plugins, and then create a Gridsome app to connect it to WordPress. What I'm going to use here is this Docker Compose file. If we take a look at this, I'm going to open this with code. Get rid of that. This is my website. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit since we're going to be using this. You can see this is just a Docker Compose file that it's just YAML, but basically we're saying we're going to create a database container. These are all of our settings. You could see I have a super secret password for my password because this is all running locally. I really don't care. You don't need to do this in Docker for what it's worth. You can actually do this on any WordPress instance as long as it's something that's controlled and something you can install plugins for. So a lot of managed WordPress instances, or they might or might not, it depends on your provider. But if you have like shared hosting and cPanel where you just install WordPress, you should be golden to be able to do this stuff. So we're going to create one container that has the MySQL database, and then the second container we're going to create is to actually hold WordPress. It's actually a WordPress image, which I think is running Apache in the back end. Yeah, that's because I'm using this this special uploads.ini actually lets me push the upload limit of the default, which I think is 2 megs, and we need like, I don't know, 10 or something for the plugins we're going to install. There are a couple plugins we need to install that are not they're not inside of the regular WordPress plugins repository. So this is just an example. This file, I'm going to include this along with the repository for those who are following along. So let's open up a new PowerShell window inside here. And I'm going to say Docker Compose up. Not you, up. Okay, so everything is kind of bootstrapping now. While that is doing its thing, this will take a minute or so before it completely gets everything up and running. Let's head back over to our stream folder that I have here, and I'm going to open another PowerShell window, and I'm going to bootstrap up myself a Gridsome website. If you don't have the Gridsome CLI installed already, just do a Google search on how to install the Gridsome CLI. It's just a CLI-based utility that lets you basically generate a Gridsome website. So I'm going to say Gridsome, create, and let's see, WP Gridsome site. And this is just going to use the default Gridsome template. So I don't believe it asks us for any kind of parameters or settings or anything. Check to see how our WordPress is coming along. It's not spitting out any more messages, so I'm assuming at this point it is finished. So we can hit this by going to, I think it's localhost 8,000. Okay, this is more or less what I was expecting. So this is a completely fresh WordPress instance. If you went into a shared hosting site, spun up a new instance of WordPress, this is exactly what you would get. Maybe not exactly, because sometimes they preset all these things for you. So let's set a site title. Let's say Gridsome Backend, because that's exactly what we're going to be using this for. We're going to go with something super simple, super secure, user and password. How about that? Yeah, it's a weak password. I'll put my email address in here. And we're going to install WordPress. All done. User, password. Make sure we can log in here. Okay, cool. We are into our WordPress instance. So before we can actually even get into Gridsome, there's one plugin we're going to need to install in WordPress, but unfortunately it's not part of the plugins repository for WordPress. If you are not familiar with WordPress, most of the time if you need to install plugins, you can come to this in this plugins section, add new, and then just search for your plugin, but this one's not there. So what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to download this manually. This is the WP GraphQL plugin by Jason Ball. I watched a pretty cool stream on this when he was on Jason Langstroth's. I can't remember. I can't spell his last name or say the last name. Anyway, he was on his stream and he was explaining how he built this whole thing, and it was really cool. This was like before I even really start getting into the static site generator thing. So let's go ahead and download this. Download. Here we go. Source code. This is what we want. Okay, yeah, it's 2.5 megs. I thought it was even higher than that. So now let's go to add plugins. Put plugin, choose file, and we'll go to downloads, WP GraphQL. Let's install that plugin. Installed successfully, and then watch this. When I click activate plugin, you now see on both the top and on the left-hand side, we have a new GraphQL settings node. So if I go here, you can see we've got some settings for GraphQL. You can see this is our endpoint, localhost 8000 GraphQL. If I click this and open this, oh, there is one more thing we need to do. We will need to also go into tools, no, settings, reading, I think it is, no, writing. Permalinks, there we go. Tools and then permalinks, and then you have to select, you can't just leave it as the default. You can't leave it as plain. So we could pick pretty much any one of these things and it should work. Let's go with, I'm usually a fan of doing the month and name like this. So get your month number and then the post name. Let's go ahead and save changes there. Our structure is going to be changed, so now let's try this thing again. So if I go into settings and then click on this, you can see it's throwing an error because we're not actually sending it any data for it to query, but it's working. So that's the last thing we need to get up and running. Let us go back into let's see, our PowerShell session that we were using to spin up Gridsome. Okay, looks like that guy is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cd to WP Gridsome site, and then we're going to code dot. So we're inside of this WP Gridsome site that we just set up. Now let's fire this thing up just to see what it gives us. So I'm going to do, I like actually to change my script from develop to dev, so I'm going to change that to dev. Whatever, we'll leave it as develop, so we can be as just straight and vanilla as possible. So let's do npm run develop. And what this is going to do is, if we don't have this hooked up to any backend, but what it would do is it'd reach out to the backend service, query and pull down all the data, and then start generating all the static pages that we would need for our website. So we can see we're running on localhost 8080. So I control click that, and this is essentially what we get. It's a very basic website. Not a whole lot going on here, but that's kind of what we're doing today. Is we're going to take the data that we have inside of WordPress using that GraphQL API that we just added, and we're going to be able to pull the posts down in order to be able to generate the pages that we need for our website. So to do that, let's see here. All right, so we do need to install a plugin. I'm going to kill this guy here, and we're going to install the Gridsome source GraphQL plugin. Gridsome has a lot of plugins that can be used to query data. There might even actually be a WordPress plugin. In my experience using the WordPress API directly, I was not as successful doing it as I was using this GraphQL. It seems to work a lot better with Gridsome and Gatsby just because they are very heavily based into GraphQL. But again, that's just my experience. If anyone has done this before and has a lot of experience using the WordPress plugin, then more power to you. So we'll give this a few minutes and let this guy finish doing its thing. I think yep, there we go. All right, cool, we're done. Okay, so the plugin's installed, and now we basically have to tell Gridsome to use the plugin. So we can do that inside of the gridsome.config.js, and we're going to add some stuff inside of the plugins array here. We're going to open a new object there, and we're going to say use, and I'm referencing my notes over here, so it is Gridsome source GraphQL, and then we're going to add some options in here. And the couple options that we do need, we need a URL, and we know that is going to be the URL is going to be wherever your GraphQL endpoint is when you're working with Gridsome. So in the case of our WordPress instance, it's http localhost 8000 /GraphQL, and we'll set a field name. These are the field name and the type name are required to reference this from inside of Gridsome. I'm going to set both of them to WP GraphQL. And we'll set the type name to WP GraphQL. Now, if we head back, before I actually run this thing, we're going to head back into our WordPress instance here, and I do want to show you that we have one post in here, which is this standard Hello World post that comes with WordPress. And what we're going to do is when we fire up Gridsome, we're going to be able to use the tools within Gridsome to query that API, or to query the GraphQL API and be able to pull this data down. So let's head back into VS Code. We're going to open our terminal back up again, and npm run develop. And something didn't work right. What did I break? Introspection is not allowed, but the query contained. This is a new bug for me. I don't know that I've seen this one before. Oh, see, this does show WP GraphQL. Okay, here's Jason actually responding in here. So this is a different platform using WP GraphQL. We might have some luck here. Let's see. How did you enable public introspection? Okay, so let's try and check that last box there and see what happens. So if I go to settings, enable public introspection. Okay. So I saw that earlier and it didn't work. I'm gonna scan through this issue again real quick just to see what happens. But this is from 19 days ago. This has me thinking that something updated or changed. Last version of source of break and change requires a specific min. Oh. Okay. All right, so now that that's turned on, let's try this again one more time before I go back and pull one of the old versions. Oh, see, yeah, that worked. All right, cool. So back to our regularly scheduled program. So we've got Gridsome connected to WP GraphQL now because we've added this plugin in here. Let's see, inside of config. Here's the settings that we had set up earlier. So that's in working order now, and we fixed this. So if you use this Explore GraphQL data here, I'm going to control click that and open this up. You can see this this playground pops up, and this is not actually what we're looking at. So I have the GraphQL playground as a separate application on my computer, but this is actually running inside of our WordPress instance, and we can use this to query data and to test the queries. So if I use this and go public, or I'm sorry, not posts, and then we'll say edges, node, and then we'll do ID, and then we'll do title, and why not? We'll do content, are the three that I usually use to demonstrate this, and hit play. We can see we're pulling this data. Now, this is, so this is our WordPress data that's actually being run from within the Gridsome GraphQL layer, if that makes sense. So anyway, that was a long way of saying that we're connected. So back into VS Code, I'm going to close my terminal for now because we're not going to need that. Let's see. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to update, just to prove that the data is in there. I'm going to go into the index.view page, which is just that main page that we saw earlier, and we're going to add a couple things in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a static query. And what a static query does is it lets you embed a GraphQL query directly inside of a template. So this way, this is for like if you have a page and you need to take some, and you need to query for data instead of generating pages, this is where you would do it. So static query, close that guy off. Now VS Code doesn't really recognize this because it doesn't recognize this as part of like a regular view template, so there's no syntax highlighting or anything here, but this should still work. And we're gonna put in the same query that we did before. So we'll do posts, and we'll do edges, and we'll do node. And then this basically gets us down to the actual fields of the post itself. So I'm interested in pulling the ID and the title. I guess actually for this portion, we're really only interested in the ID and the title. We could put content in there, but we're not going to display it here. So now with this static query here, we should be able to access data from directly within this page. So we're going to, inside of our layout here, we're going to add a new paragraph tag. I guess we can make this a div tag, it doesn't matter. So we'll say a new div here. And then we're going to add H1, we'll put posts. What we're doing here is we're going to create an index of the blog posts that we have inside of WordPress. So we'll say post just as a way of, making it pop on the page. And then we're going to add an unordered list. And then we're going to, instead of just adding a line item, we're going to use V4 to kind of loop through a series of data, in this case, which is the posts. And we'll say V4, we're going to use some extrapolation, I think is what it's called. Basically, we're going to pull out the node from, let's see, from static, which references the static query down here, edges, and then, static, posts, edges, because the edges is an array, and then we're pulling out the node here. So this is going to allow us to loop through the specific posts, and then we also need to set a key. So we'll set that to let's see, node.id like so. And we'll open our list here, and then we're just going to put node.title. And to further just kind of reiterate what we're doing here is the div in h1, it's regular HTML, and the unordered list. But by using this specific syntax in Vue, we can create multiple list items that loop through the static posts, edges, and then node is a way of just pulling the node out of each one of the edges. And because I'm pulling it out like the way that I did, I can reference the actual fields on the nodes themselves, in this case, which is the ID. We're interested in setting as the kind of key for this list so Vue can track it. And then the title, which we're going to display just the title of our post inside here. So I'm going to save this. When I save it, it's automatically going to kind of rebuild with the data that's cached. And if we go back into here, we can see our posts now. We now see Hello World, which Hello World is not being pulled from here. It's actually being pulled from WordPress itself. And I can actually prove this by adding a new post, and we'll say Hello World. I'd say hello from WordPress, and we'll leave everything else the same. We'll publish this out, just leave it as it is, right? Now, one thing about Gridsome and most of these static site generators is you can't really, like, once you update data in the back end, it doesn't know about it. That data is only pulled when it's pulled and cached every time you build. So what we'll need to do in order to see that data is we're going to stop our process, and we're going to run another npm run develop, which is going to pull all the data back in, get everything all cached locally, and let us be able to see those changes. So now if I go here and refresh this page, we also see now hello from WordPress, and the reason it's on top is because WordPress by default is going to send this data in a date descending order. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like and share it out to your friends. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to my channel for new videos every week. If you're looking for help on an issue or just want to collaborate with other developers, be sure to join my Discord by clicking the fullstack.chat link in the description below, or just enter it into your browser to join. Thank you so much and have a great day.